17:09 Claude responded. The sharp crack of fingers snapping just beside my ear cut straight through the ambient hum of the servers. The sharp crack of fingers snapping just beside my ear cut straight through the ambient hum of the servers. Hey, Wi-Fi girl, you even listening to me? I didn't turn around immediately. My attention was fixed on a dense infrastructure diagram spread across my monitor, fiber routing paths, cooling redundancies, failover configurations. The kind of blueprint entire companies depend on without ever knowing it exists. Snap. Snap. Louder this time, more insistent. I exhaled slowly and swiveled my chair around. Standing in front of me was Evan Cole, 26 years old, sporting an overpriced blazer and a smirk that seemed surgically attached to his face. Son of the company's senior investor, which apparently gave him the impression he owned the air everyone else breathed. The Wi-Fi is lagging, he announced, throwing a dramatic gesture toward the glass conference room where a video call hung frozen mid-sentence. We got investors on the line in 3 minutes. Handle it. I held his gaze without blinking. That's not my role, I said, keeping my voice level. For network issues, you'd need to submit a ticket through. He cut me off with a sharp, contemptuous laugh. I don't submit tickets. I tell people to do their jobs. You're sitting right here with a laptop, aren't you? So fix it. I'm in the middle of something, I answered, turning back toward my screen. And I don't have admin access to your internal network. That was the moment the room changed. His palm came down on the table with enough force to send ripples across my coffee cup. Every conversation in the office died at once. You know what? His voice climbed sharply. I am done with this attitude from support staff. You're useless. He thrust a finger toward the door. Get out. You're fired. I don't want to see you on this floor again. I paused, not from shock, but from a kind of detached curiosity. He genuinely believed he had the authority to dismiss me. I closed my laptop slowly, rose to my feet, and looked him directly in the eye. You're firing me? I asked. Effective immediately, he said, with a smirk. I gave a single nod. Understood. Then I picked up my folder, the one containing a contract that governed the entire building's infrastructure, and walked out without another word. He thought he had just exercised power. What he had actually done was sever the lifeline keeping his company alive. One thing worth noting, this is a fictional story. Certain elements have been shaped with the help of artificial intelligence to make it more engaging, emotionally resonant, and to carry meaningful lessons worth reflecting on. The elevator doors glided shut behind me with a soft chime, sealing off the stunned silence I'd left on that floor. I didn't hurry. I never do. Real control isn't noisy, it isn't frantic or reactive. It's measured, deliberate, and patient. The lobby greeted me with cool air as I stepped out. Behind the security desk, Mr. Harlan glanced up from his monitors. Afternoon, Miss Hollis, he said. Not anymore, I replied, with just the faintest trace of a smile, and continued toward the exit. Across the street, I ordered a coffee and settled by the window. Timing matters in situations like this. Precision matters even more. I didn't need to be on the 37th floor to know exactly what was about to unfold up there. About 10 minutes after I left, Daniel Reyes stepped out of the service elevator. He was the building operations manager, a methodical man who treated schedules like sacred documents. He carried a leather folder and a bottle of champagne meant for a celebration. He entered the glass conference room with a practiced smile. Gentlemen, good afternoon. Where is she? We have documents to finalize. Evan barely glanced up. Who? Ruthless, Daniel said, scanning the space. She was setting up in here. We need her signature before 5 o'clock or your infrastructure extension lapses. Evan scoffed, cracking open a drink. Oh, her. Yeah, I fired her. The room didn't simply fall quiet. It collapsed into silence. Leia Chen from HR walked in at that exact moment, catching the tail end of his sentence. The color drained from her face immediately. Daniel stared at him, confusion shifting into something far more dangerous. You did what? I fired her, Evan repeated, slower now, defensive. She was useless. Couldn't even sort out basic Wi-Fi. Daniel looked at him. Then at the empty chair I had been sitting in minutes before. Then at the unsigned folder resting untouched on the table. She's not IT, Leia said under her breath. Daniel swallowed hard. Evan, Ruthless isn't support staff. Evan frowned. Then what is she? Daniel's voice dropped, but every syllable landed like a blow. She's the infrastructure leaseholder for this entire building. She controls the fiber network, the cooling systems, the power redundancies. Without her, this entire floor ceases to function. Evan's smirk vanished. He reached for the contract slowly and flipped it open. His eyes moved across the header and stopped cold. Prepared by Ruthless, Managing Director, Apex Infrastructure Group. A small, fragile sound escaped him. Oh. Daniel didn't sit. He didn't reach for the champagne. He stood with one hand pressed flat against the table, as though he needed something solid beneath him. Evan, hear me clearly, he said, his voice tightening. This isn't something HR can smooth over. Evan forced a laugh, but it came out hollow. You're overreacting. She was sitting here with a laptop like she was on a help desk. She was reviewing your renewal. Daniel cut in. The infrastructure extension, the one keeping your servers cooled, your bandwidth prioritized, your entire operation stable. Leia stepped closer, her voice low but direct. Evan, she isn't a vendor you can swap out. She is the system. Daniel nodded, now fully in crisis mode. The fiber trunk your company runs on lease through her firm. The dedicated cooling loop for your server room, her contract. The backup generators, her authorization. Without her, all of it reverts. Evan stared at them, confusion curdling into something colder. Reverts to what? Base building standards, Daniel said. Which means almost nothing. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in. Evan looked back at the document in his hands. The signature line empty. So you're saying, he swallowed, I just what? Delayed a contract. Daniel shook his head slowly. No. You terminated it. That was the moment it truly landed. The arrogance drained out of Evan like air from a punctured tire. Call her, he said quickly. Just call her and tell her to come back. This is fixable. Leia didn't move. She walked out without a single argument, she said. That's not someone who comes back. Daniel exhaled heavily, already reaching for his phone. Evan, he said quietly, you didn't fire an employee. You cut off the infrastructure keeping your company alive. Across the street, I stirred my coffee and watched the tower's reflection shift in the glass. The decision had already been made. My office isn't on the executive floors. It never was. It sits on the fourth level, behind reinforced doors and mechanical corridors that most of the building's tenants don't know exist. No glass walls, no views of the skyline, just quiet systems, steady hums, and control. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Cool air, low lighting, rows of monitors blinking to life as I set my bag down. This was where the building actually lived. Everything upstairs was just decoration. I felt no anger. Anger distorts judgment. This wasn't personal. This was contractual. I opened Apex Infrastructure's control interface and pulled up Horizon Peak Tower's tenant dashboard. Suite 3700. Novodyne Systems. Status: negotiation terminated by tenant representative. Clear enough. I began methodically. Step 1. Access priority. Novodyne had been paying a premium for executive elevator routing. Their badges triggered priority dispatch, shaving wait times down to seconds. I found the setting and reset it to standard allocation. They would wait like everyone else from now on. Step 2. Logistics. A server shipment was scheduled to arrive within days. Freight elevator access required an active infrastructure token issued by me. I revoked it. If they needed to move equipment, they'd be doing it the hard way. Then came the real lever, climate control. The building's central system handled general office comfort, but high-density server rooms demanded dedicated cooling loops. Those loops weren't part of the base lease. They were mine. I opened the HVAC schematic, located their suite, and adjusted the chilled water flow from high priority back to standard building allocation. The system acknowledged the command. Valves would begin recalibrating within the hour. I leaned back slightly and watched the confirmation log scroll across the screen. Nothing I had done broke a single rule. Nothing crossed a single line. I was simply honoring what had been made perfectly explicit. They no longer wanted my services. I respected that. Infrastructure doesn't collapse all at once. It unravels in layers, quietly at first, almost gently, as if offering you just enough time to notice what's happening. At 3:20 in the afternoon, the first symptom surfaced. The smart glass walls in Novadine's main conference room stopped responding to touch. They were designed to frost over for privacy on command. Instead, they remained completely transparent. Evan was in the middle of a heated exchange with his logistics lead, pacing, gesturing, while the entire open office watched through the glass. Subtle. Embarrassing. Not yet alarming. Then came the doors. The biometric scanners separating the executive wing from the general workspace flickered, then disengaged. They didn't lock anyone out. That would have violated safety code. Instead, they failed open, silently and permanently. Interns drifted into areas they had never been permitted to enter. Conversations overlapped. Noise spread in every direction. Still manageable. Then the network began to stutter. Packet loss climbed. Calls froze mid-sentence. Video feeds broke apart into blocky, fragmented images. The dedicated bandwidth Novadine had long enjoyed was gone, now competing equally with every other tenant in the building. And finally, the heat. It started as a vague discomfort, a subtle shift in the air. Then the server room alerts fired. Temperature reading 78 degrees. 79. 80. Cooling fans surged to maximum, systems straining to compensate, but without the dedicated chilled loop, it was a battle they couldn't win. Upstairs, Evan stood in the center of it all, issuing commands as though nothing fundamental had shifted. Restart the routers. Call building maintenance. This is completely unacceptable. He still thought it was a glitch. Still believed someone just needed to fix it. An email notification appeared on my screen from Evan Cole. Subject: urgent. System issues. Wi-Fi unstable. Doors acting weird. AC not working properly. Need this resolved ASAP. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just another order. I read it once, then filed it into a folder I labeled Documentation. Upstairs, the systems continued drifting further out of alignment, and he was still trying to command something he no longer controlled. By 4:10 in the afternoon, the situation had moved well past inconvenience into genuine instability. The server room temperature hit 81 degrees. Cooling fans ran at full capacity, a constant, mechanical whine trying to compensate for something they were never built to handle alone. Without the dedicated chilled loop, heat was no longer being adequately removed. It was accumulating, saturating the room. On my monitors, alerts began stacking. Critical threshold approaching. Packet loss at 52%. Bandwidth priority revoked. Upstairs, systems weren't merely slowing down anymore. They were failing. Video calls dropped entirely. Internal tools stopped syncing. Files refused to upload. Every process that depended on speed and precision was either crawling or completely frozen. My desk phone rang. I glanced at it and let it ring. Then again, longer this time. I picked it up, switched it to silent, and turned it face down. Moments later, another email arrived. Subject: this is serious. Rin, something is wrong with the building systems. Call me immediately. We need this fixed now. Not please. Not sorry. Just urgency draped in expectation. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a different file, a list of current tenants, available capacity, Reserved infrastructure blocks. There it was. High priority bandwidth allocation, cooling reserves, redundant fiber paths. Unassigned. Released. Opportunity doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It simply appears, waiting for someone perceptive enough to recognize it. I leaned back, considering the numbers, the timing, the leverage. Upstairs, Evan was escalating, calling building management, demanding explanations, raising his voice louder by the minute as though sheer volume could override physics. But this was never about volume. It was about control. And control had already changed hands. I reached for my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and stopped on a name I hadn't needed in quite some time. Then I pressed dial, because while one company was coming apart, another was about to receive exactly what it had been waiting for. The restaurant operated with that specific kind of quiet that only money can purchase: soft lighting, unhurried conversations, polished surfaces reflecting people who understood the value of patience. Nathan Cole rose from his chair as I approached, CEO of Helixer Systems, mid-50s, composed in the way that men become when they've never needed to raise their voice to be taken seriously. "Ren," he said, extending his hand. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you today." "Things change," I replied, settling into the booth across from him. He studied my expression for a fraction of a second, then nodded. "I'll assume that's good news for me." I placed a slim folder on the table between us, but didn't open it. "A high-priority infrastructure block just became available," I said. That earned his full attention. "Define high priority." "Dedicated fiber bandwidth with priority routing, an independent cooling loop, full system integration privileges, elevator priority access, the entire stack." He leaned back slightly, processing. "That's not on the market." "It wasn't," I said calmly. "Now it is." His eyes sharpened. "Novodyne." "Their renewal was terminated," I replied. "Effective immediately." Silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, just precise. "How quickly can you provision?" he asked. 10 minutes after signature," I said. And that was the moment the deal was made. Terms: 5 years, standard rates, plus an expedited acquisition fee. Nathan smiled, the kind of smile that surfaces when a problem you've carried for years quietly resolves itself. "My CTO has been requesting this capacity for 2 years," he said. "We've been boxed in upstairs, waiting for space that never came free." "It just did," I said. He reached for the folder. "Then let's not waste it." We went through the contract line by line, no rushing, no assumptions, only clarity. When he signed, it was clean and deliberate. $1.2 million over 5 years. I signed after him, closed the folder, and slid it back into my bag. Nathan raised his glass slightly across the table. "Efficient timing." I allowed myself a small smile. "Efficient decisions," I corrected. As I stepped out into the evening, my phone buzzed once, a system notification. Bandwidth allocation reassigned. Somewhere above us, data had already begun flowing in a new direction. By early evening, Novodyne wasn't navigating technical difficulties anymore. It was navigating collapse. The server room crossed 83 degrees. Then 84. Automated safeguards activated, throttling performance to prevent permanent hardware damage. Systems slowed to a crawl, then began shutting down in segments. Critical processes stalled. Data pipelines froze mid-transfer. Whatever they had been trying to present to investors earlier that day was effectively gone. Meanwhile, the network situation deteriorated further. Their priority routing no longer existed. The bandwidth they had long dominated had been redirected, now flowing directly to Helixer Systems 2 floors below. Novodyne's connection degraded into something barely functional. Emails delayed. Calls dropped. Internal platforms wouldn't load. Employees began to leave, not dramatically, not with any kind of scene. Quietly. One by one, laptops closed. Conversations ended. There was simply no reason to stay when nothing worked. By 7 o'clock in the evening, only a handful remained. Evan among them, pacing, visibly sweating, circling a situation he had no way to control. My phone rang just as I returned to my office. Unknown number. Ren Hollis, I answered. A measured male voice came through. This is Victor Lang, General Counsel for Novodyne's parent group. I said nothing immediately. I've been informed of significant infrastructure disruptions affecting our operations, he continued. We need to understand the situation and determine how it can be resolved. The building is functioning normally, I said. Your services are aligned with your current contractual status. A pause. Then, quieter, more careful. I understand there may have been a misunderstanding earlier today involving our on-site representative. There was no misunderstanding, I replied. Another pause, longer this time. What would it take to restore full service? He asked. I leaned back in my chair. Under normal circumstances, I would reopen negotiations immediately, I said. However, the capacity you released has already been reassigned. Silence. You reassigned it, he said slowly. I don't hold unused assets, I answered. That wouldn't be responsible. His voice tightened. We need a meeting. I'm unavailable until Monday, I said. That's 3 days. Yes. Our systems won't survive 3 days. I glanced at the monitor beside me, temperature still climbing. Then I'd suggest powering down whatever you can, I said calmly. Monday morning, 9 o'clock. I ended the call. The weekend was going to be a long one for them. Monday morning came exactly on schedule. At 8:45, the lobby was already crowded. Dozens of Novodyne employees stood at the turnstiles, badges extended, confusion spreading with every failed attempt. Beep. Red light. Beep. Red light again. What's wrong with the system? Someone demanded. Why won't my card work? The answer was straightforward. Without an active network handshake, the rolling security encryption couldn't refresh. Their credentials had expired overnight, exactly as designed. I walked through the front entrance, coffee in hand, heels steady against the marble floor. Mr. Harlan gave me a brief nod as I passed. My access card tapped once. Green light. The gates opened. Hey! Evan's voice cut through the noise behind me. I turned slightly. He looked worse than Friday, same clothes, no composure, just unfiltered frustration. You did this, he said sharply, pushing forward before security stepped into his path. You locked us out. I didn't lock you out, I said evenly. Your system requires network validation. You no longer have one. Fix it, he demanded. Right now. I have a meeting, I replied, checking my watch. 9 o'clock. The elevator doors closed before he could say another word. The fourth-floor conference room was already prepared. No glass walls this time. No distractions. Victor Lang was there. So was Richard Cole, Evan's father. And Evan himself, quieter now, but visibly unraveling. They sat across from me. I set a single document on the table. The infrastructure renewal, Richard said. We're ready to sign. I rested my hand lightly on the paper. That contract is no longer available, I said. Victor frowned. Explain. The capacity tied to your agreement was released on Friday, I continued. It has since been acquired. By whom? Richard asked sharply. Helixer Systems. The room went completely still. Evan looked up, eyes wide. You sold it. I reassigned available infrastructure, I corrected. You can't do that, he said, his voice cracking. I already did. Silence settled across the table. No one misunderstood what had happened. By Wednesday, Novodyne was already in retreat. Without bandwidth, without cooling, without access, the 37th floor had become uninhabitable. Their team dismantled what they could, piece by piece, forced to move equipment through service corridors that were never designed for speed or efficiency. Evan wasn't among them. Word reached me later that he had been reassigned to a smaller regional office, somewhere far removed from glass towers and decisions he could no longer afford to make carelessly. The lease termination penalties were substantial. The building's owners were satisfied. 2 months later, Helixer Systems moved onto the floor. Everything functioned precisely as it should: stable temperatures, optimal bandwidth, quiet efficiency. Nathan's team submitted proper requests. They asked questions. They listened. As for me, I returned to my office. Same as always. Systems balanced, contracts honored, control intact, because in the end, nothing had truly been taken from me. I had simply allowed things to settle back into the place where they had always belonged. I walked away from that moment carrying more than just a signed contract and a quiet victory. I walked away with clarity. Not every form of power announces itself loudly. Sometimes the strongest move available to you is simply knowing your own value and letting your actions speak while everyone else is still raising their voice. There are 5 lessons I carry with me from this. The first, never underestimate quiet expertise. The people who keep systems running are often the very ones you overlook until everything stops. The second, respect is not optional. How you treat people, especially those you assume are beneath you, has a way of circling back. The third, power doesn't live in titles. It lives in knowledge and control, and those who genuinely understand systems rarely feel the need to prove it. The fourth, never let ego drive decisions that demand awareness. A single careless moment can cost far more than you ever anticipated. And the fifth, patience is a strategy. You don't always need to strike back immediately. Sometimes all you have to do is wait and let timing do the work for you.